Okay, so here we're going to look at typography in Photoshop and particularly how we get grunge style typography. So when I'm looking at grunge design or sort of digital era design, these are the kind of things we're looking at. So lots of layering, lots of texture, lots of sort of broken lettering that's been stacked and stacked over the top of each other, lettering inside sort of boxes, sliced, mixture of sort of handwriting, different fonts going on. So it's really sort of chaotic style of typography. So there's a few things we're going to sort of have a go at. We've also got this sort of like negative, positive going on where they've got sort of shapes cut out of things. So those are the sort of things we're going to go at. So this is what we're going to aim for. So I'm going to show you how to do these three. So this sort of negative, positive where the text has been sort of cut up and we've got texture overlaid and we've got it sort of mishmashed. This sort of layered type where there's lots and lots and lots going on all over the top of each other, and then this sort of like sliced, grungy, textured text in sort of these boxes. So nice and simple. If I make myself a new document, and I'm just going to go A3 landscape. So the first thing I need to do, if I start with, say, this one, actually let's start with this one. This one's the easiest one. I'm obviously going to type out my word that I've chosen. So I need my text tool and I'm going to type out the word legibility. And I'm going to go to my character panel over here, and if you not go that, you can open window and find it there. And I'm going to make sure that my line spacing is set to automatic. Now obviously pink is not a very grungy colour, so I'm going to go for sort of a browny colour. Let's go dark brown. Okay, and then I'm going to look for some different fonts. So I quite like this font, and I'm going to Command C, Command V to copy and paste it. I also quite like typewriter font. Now, to get that kind of layering that we've got going on, we want a range of different fonts. So you can see I've got sort of 2 or 3 different varieties of fonts in here. If I actually go into this layer here and open up this group that I've got, you can see I've also got longer pieces of text. So I've not just got the word legibility. So you can see there I've got the word legibility repeated different times in different shades of browns, different sizes. I've also got the definition of legibility. So that gives me a bigger piece of text to work with. It means I can make that text smaller. It's going to fill up more space. So that's quite important for this, is having sort of different pieces of text to work with. So that's going to work better. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste one of those layers onto here. So nice and simple. I'm going to copy and paste that a couple of times. I'm going to change the colour of it slightly, so I'm going to make it paler. I'm going to change the size of that. And I'm going to now I've put it in a text box, so when I've done my text, I'll make that a little bit bigger actually. So when I've gone and done my text, I've drawn myself a box to put it in. That means I can change, if I double click, I can change how long I want the lines and how short I want them to be. That's really important for this because you sort of want blocks of text to put together. And again, I'm going to sort of change up my text a bit. Choose different colour. So the key thing here is various font weights. So I've got bold, I've got slightly different versions of font, I've got thin or light versions of font. I could do obviously regular, semi-bold, different sizes. So I'm changing the font size itself, and then a variety of sort of like large bits of text versus smaller bits of text. And I don't like that one, so I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm also changing the colour. Now the order that my layers go in, obviously control the order that you see these things in, so that gives you a little bit of control as well. We go for that one. You could start to play around with opacity here. So if I just open my panel, so yours will most likely look like this. So you can see in my layers panel, I've got opacity. So I can change the opacity of that, which looks quite good. I've also got blend modes, so it will sort of blend with whatever's underneath it. So I quite like that one, where you can see the text underneath it as well. Now, once you've got a composition you're happy with, obviously I would add much more to this, but I'll leave it at that for now. I'm going to just draw over all of them, or you can click in your layers, hold shift and select the ones you want, and then I'm going to use the little folder icon just to group them. I'm going to put layered text. So always organise your layers, always keep things nice and neat and tidy. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller and just put it to one side, and I'm going to lock it as well so that it doesn't shift around. Now I can hide that if I want to put it out of the way, but I think it's fine there. Next one we'll do is this one here. So if I go back to my new document, now for this one, I need all my text in separate boxes. So I'm going to have to draw a new box for each letter that I want. Just get rid of that Latin. And I have to do that for every letter of the word that we want to do. Now we'll stop there. So what I also want to do is that contrast. So that contrast in size, that contrast in font, that contrast in sort of weight. So I've got some chunky fonts versus some thin ones versus sans serif versus serif. So I'll make that much bigger. I'm going to change this font. Something like that. And you can see I'm also not putting them in a line. So obviously if I was spelling it normally, it would all go in a nice straight line, one letter after the other. Here I'm looking for a more exciting composition. So I'm going back to my examples. Looking at something like this, it's construct. So we've got sort of a weird arrangement of how those letters are organised. So I'm going to do a similar thing. So I'm going to have my L, my E next to each other. I'm going to have my G directly underneath. And then my I is going to be nice and big. I need to make my box bigger for that. Choose better font. Getting bigger still. Like that. So we're constantly creating this contrast, this sort of juxtaposition, and using those letters to sort of determine where the next letter goes. So using them as almost like building blocks, how do they fit into each other? You could rotate some of these, so I could have, you know, things on angles like that. If you wanted to make it more interesting. I think I want that thinner, so I'm going to go regular. Now what I want to do, if I go back to sort of the example that I'd done earlier, is some of these are brown on a white background, some are white on a brown background. So a really easy way to do that is just to get your rectangle tool, and I'm going to use the colour that I've already used, pop that behind, select my text, make that white. So that's nice and simple there. You can see with my other example I had a letter sort of cut in half and there was a different letter on top. So if I said this one was going to be the one that was going to be in half with a different letter, so I'd do the same thing but with a different font. Let's go with that one. So now half of this letter is going to be the sans serif, half of it's going to be the serif. So I'm going to select half of the serif font, which should be that one, and do Command C, Command V. So I've just used my rectangular marquee to select that there. Same with this bottom one, select half of that layer, and that should be that one. Make sure you've got that layer selected, and then Command C, Command V, and it will copy and paste that part of that letter. And then we should be able to stick these together like that. Now I'm actually going to make this top half bigger, so there's a bit more of an exaggerated sort of contrast between them. It lines up a bit nicer. So I don't need those two E's now. I do need to make this white. Now obviously it's no longer a piece of text, so in order to make that white I actually need to go to my paint bucket tool, and I'm going to choose white down here, and I'm going to select that and make it white. And then obviously I want to put a rectangle in that's going to be our other colour. Don't want an outline on it. And then all I need to do is make sure that all of that is organised in the right way in my layers panel, which it should be. There we go. So now you can see I've got my sort of like chopped in half letter. I've got some letters in an interesting composition. I've got different fonts, different sizes and things like that. The other thing that I've got going on here is sort of like smaller versions of the word to fill up some of this negative space. So I could then type out like that, make it smaller. Make that box smaller because we don't need it that big. And pop that in that space there. Something like that. So again, we're building up that sort of interesting composition, different sizes of text, full words, individual letters, letters cut up and changed into different fonts. The final thing we've got is this added texture, and you can see I've done the texture so that it almost like eats away either at the letter or the box. So if I show you this on the letter, for example, so I've got my letter I here. Now I'm going to use a brush, so if I show you a brush real quick, and I eyedrop the brown colour so that you can see it. Now if I want to add that brush on straight away and draw with it, you can see I've got a no symbol, so it's going to ask me to rasterise that layer, that will permanently edit that layer. So whenever you're using a brush, always do it on its own layer. So you can see now, I can draw with my brush. I'm going to go up to my brushes sort of little folder up here, across to brushes itself, and I'm looking for these special effects brushes. I want these sort of splattery effect brushes. So if I make that a little bigger up in here, then you should be able to sort of see. There we go. So we get this lovely sort of texture. We can change the size of that if you want more or less detail. Some of them are sort of further apart. I've got more contrast in them. So it's those two sort of spatter brushes that we're using. Now I'm just going to delete that and start again. The fact that this is on its own layer as well means you can move it around if it's not in the right place, make it smaller if you've got too much of it. You can erase it easily, you can change the opacity of it, so it's really important that you do have this on its own layer. Now if I started to go over there and start to do that, you can see all of this brush splatter also ends up on the rest of my design, which is not what I want at all. So if I Command Z that, I want this to stay inside of that box. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my selection tool and I'm going to select this box, which basically tells it on this layer you can only create that effect within this space. So you're only allowed to do it in there. So you'll see when I go to my brush tool now, it's confined. You know, if I go out here, it doesn't do anything. It only does it in that space. And I'm going to make it a bit smaller actually, so I get it a bit more concentrated. And I'm trying to make the sort of like edge of this text look like it's being sort of rusted or eaten away. Now, to get rid of this effect, which we call the sort of marching ants, Command D to deselect, and you can see I've gone over the line slightly, so I'm actually just going to make that smaller. So again, having it on its own layer is really important, and that's that effect. So you can do the same here. So if I do a new layer again, draw myself a box where I want that effect to go. Now this time I might do white on top, so I want it to affect the box rather than the text. So if I go for my brush again and I go to white, when I go up here you'll see it sort of adds the white. So I'm using a sort of two-colour colour scheme, which makes it really simple to do that kind of effect. So Command D to get rid of those wiggly lines, and then you can see the effect you've got here. Now I've missed a bit on the end, so I'm going to make this bigger and just sort of overlap it. Now obviously this is getting kind of messy, so I've got my rectangle layer, I've got that layer, so I would start grouping these things together. Same here, so I've got my effect layer, I've got my rectangle and my letter I, so I would group all of those together. So start to be nice and organised. So you can see there we're getting that sort of textured effect, we're getting this sort of eaten away at the text sort of thing. You could do it just to one of these letters as well. So if I say take the letter G, layer on top, my brush is already on white, I can start to add that effect around the edge. Again, if I wanted to, if I got lots of stuff in the way, I could just draw myself a box so that I know it's going to stay within that space and I'm not too worried about the effect going on other things. So you can see it doesn't affect that other box there at all. Command D to deselect. So you can build on that as much as you want, but you can sort of see the effect we're going for there and how you put that together. And now I'm just going to draw over the whole thing, or again you could do Shift and select in there, and I'm going to group the whole lot. You can put groups within groups, so you can see my groups are now inside of that main group, and I'm going to call it Mishmash. And I'm going to move that all up there because I've got the group selected. You'll see up here it says auto select group. So if I am trying to move something and I want to move the whole group, have auto select group on. If I just wanted to move, say, that particular layer, if I unlock that, it won't let me. It's always going to move the whole group itself. So if you then change that to auto select layer, it will auto select that layer for you, and then you can move that individual layer if you wanted to adjust something. So that's just a little tip once you've got stuff in groups and things like that. Again, I'm going to lock these so that they sort of stay out of my way. Last one we're going to do is sort of a mixture of those sort of things that we've been doing. So I'm going to have two pieces of text. So I'm going to split my word in half. I'm going to go for one slightly thinner and one slightly thicker piece of text. Let's go bigger as well. Let's do that. So we've got our two pieces of text. Again, I've been looking at examples to sort of guide me for this. So looking at how they use text, how they sort of combine things. I quite like this sort of split text effect here where it's sort of chopped and moved. So I'm going to have a go at that. We also get a lot of text sort of in boxes or on boxes. Yeah, we've got the split text again. Here we've got it sort of on a shape. So this is sort of really where I'm getting my inspiration from, is from these other examples. So obviously you need to draw yourself a rectangle. I might stick to the brown theme for today. So let's make it that colour. I could obviously do that in my properties panel as well. Don't want an outline on it. And have two of those. So Command C and V. This one just needs to be slightly shorter. So now I need my text on top, and I need my text in white. Okay, easy enough. Next thing I need to do is slice this text. So to get that sort of chopped effect and be able to move it around, I need to rasterize it. So you've got to be happy with the size of your text, you've got to be happy with the font, you've got to be happy with whether it's bold or italic. I can't respell anything or anything like that. So I need to be perfectly happy with it before I rasterize it, because once it's rasterized, I can no longer edit those things. So I'm just going to right click the layer that's got my type on it, rasterize type. Now you should see that I can't double click that type anymore. I can't use my text tool on it. It's not identifying it as text. So now I'm just going to lock that rectangle in place a minute. I can chop part of my letter up. Now I'm actually going to use polygonal lasso to draw that selection. I could use my marquee if I just wanted to take sort of half of it. And you'll see now I can grab that half of that text. But I want an angle. I want it to look sort of sliced. So I'm going to do polygonal lasso, and I'm going to do this sort of slice across here. Same thing, draw your selection, then go straight to your move tool, and then you can move it wherever you want. You can change the angle of that as well, so it looks even more sort of sliced. And then Command D to deselect. So that's my first sliced one. I'm going to do the same thing with this layer, so I'm going to rasterize it. I'm going to draw over the bit that I want to select out of it. Straight up to my move tool, my selection tool. And again, misalign it, move it, make it bigger, make it smaller, whatever it is that you want to do to get that sort of chopped effect. Command D to deselect. So that gives us our two pieces of sliced text. Now I'm going to group that one together and that one together. So that I can then put these on like a little bit of an angle, so we get some more interesting sort of composition going on. Now the last thing that we got going on was that texture. Most of grunge design tends to have some texture going on in it somewhere, so I'm going to do the same thing. Add a new layer, and then I'm going to draw myself a box where I want this to go, and because I've now got it on an angle, I'm going to use my polygonal lasso so I can get that angle right. So now I've got a box where I know that that effect is going to go. I'm going to have this in white, and I'm going to add that splatter to sort of the bottom of there. Now if you look on mine, I've got sort of like two tones. I've got some like grey faded splatter, and then I've got the clear white splatter. All I've done there is undo, change the opacity of that layer a little bit. and then done the same thing again over the top. So I've done one that's slightly faint, and then one that's a bit stronger over the top. And I'm going to change the size of my brush here, go up a little bit. So I'm on a new layer now, and I've gone over with a sort of bolder effect. I could change that round. Maybe I want the bigger one to be more opaque, and the one on top to be full strength. Handy. Remember, I can make these as big or as small as I want, so I can stretch it. And that's my texture. I would then do the same to this, and then obviously we would end up with this kind of effect. So that is 3 different ways of doing grunge inspired typography. It's not the only way. There are lots of other things you can do, especially with overlapping, negative space, slicing letters, different size letters. So have a good look at other ways, other inspiration that you could take. But those are sort of 3 sort of key approaches to designing grunge style type in Photoshop.